and just finish this session together. And once more, we go back to our screen. I'm going to skip this. Participle is often adverbial in nature, so that's the third use. But we are not going to look at that this coming week. We're only going to look at the substantival, which we have already done, the one who sees, the one who loves, and so on. We're going to emphasize the adjectival at modifying a noun of some kind or modifying a substantival phrase. So that's the second use of the participle. All right. Now, I want to review briefly. I think that I've gone over this last time, but just for review quickly, how we form the weak aorist participle. Notice how we form the aorist indicative. Blepo becomes eblipsa, and the sigma is joined to the P, becomes psi. And the augment is added in the indicative aorist, and it becomes past time. I saw. And I am asking, I told. This is a contract verb, epsilon contract verb. I told, I am seeing, I'm asking, sorry, or I am demanding. And in order to make it past tense, I use the augment and the sigma and the weak aorist form. This is not a strong aorist verb. So it becomes a te sa, I asked, or I demanded. But participles, remember, do not necessarily have past time. The context may demand they are past time, but the form itself does not say that. So we take the augment off when we form the participle, and we simply add the endings. And in the aorist tense, they are as, and the accusative would be anta. So here we have feminine and neuter. Instead of on, it is on. Instead of usa, it is asa. I taste asa, feminine. And then the forms look feminine from then on. So the similarities will be evident with the present active participle, except that the weak aorist active participle uses a as a key vowel instead of a.
Excuse me, sir, can you go back on the previous slide? Yeah, add the endings. What is this? Please explain it.
Well, I'm going to do that. Let me do it quickly here. These are the endings. These are the endings of the present of the strong aorist participle, sorry. Labon. We know that lambano is a strong aorist verb. We know that elabon, page 104, or is it 14? I always forget. I think it's page 104. The strong aorist stem is lab. Lamban on would be the present tense participle, but we take the aorist stem, lab, and then add the same endings as look like the present. So this is the strong aorist we talked about last time. So this should be familiar to you now. Strong aorist stem, lab, not lamban on, that would be present participle, lab on. strong aorist. But the weak aorist participle, the forms are different. Now we must take a verb that is a weak aorist, not one of the ones on the page 104, but for example, luo is one of these. Add sigma and add the endings, which are as, asa, an. And what is the meaning? Loosing. That's all I know at this point. I just know ing, loosing. So you're saying perhaps, well, I have that translation with the present. Yes, you do. Because we don't know yet, we have no context for this participle. It might be past tense, but we don't know that yet. The participle itself will only tell us ing, loosing. So we translate loosing. Now, if we have ha loosas, the one loosing, it is an aorist participle, but it still means the one loosing. It doesn't change by itself. The context usually will change and we will know it's past time, but not always. And we must remember that in Greek, not like English, in Greek, the tenses, present tense, aorist tense, are not primarily time oriented, not present tense and past tense and so on. That is why we call it aorist tense. Aorist has to do with the summary of what this tense means. It does not necessarily mean past tense. It means an action that is probably either one time or is being summed up in one verb. I saw, I came, I went. Those are all, they are past tense, but they are also summing up an action. And the aorist tense will do that without necessarily being past time. Now, when you look at the endings, you notice again, there's a very great similarity to the present tense active participles. But again, because we have masculine, feminine, neuter, we have to have three columns of endings. So the nominative, lusas. The accusative, lus anta. The genitive, lus antos. The dative, lus anti. And so on. Notice here that the neuter vowel is on and not on, not omicron, but alpha, as it is here. Not own, not lu-own, as in the present participle, but loose. Sigma is very common with aorist tense. Loose, as. So add this sigma to make the present stem. And I teach this a little differently than McIver. McIver says add sas, santa, santos, santi, and makes these all endings. Whereas I say add this sigma and make the aorist stem, and then add the endings as, anta, antos, anti. Whichever way you talk about it, the result is the same. You need to memorize these forms. In fact, you should have memorized them already. If you haven't, you need to catch up. This is the weak aorist participle active. And I believe with the addition of the participle ami, which we also had own and so forth, we now have all of chapter 20, section 1, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look just a minute at the textbook. In fact, I can stop sharing, and that's one thing I can do, I think, is open the book unless it doesn't cooperate with me. I don't have everything I should have. No. Uh, so I won't go there. When my geek comes, I can correct this and show you the textbook. But I'm not going to try to do it like I did last time. Um, it, not everyone can see it anyway. But in your textbook, let me go back and share the screen again. In your textbook, you will find at the end of the book examples of comparing verbs. I ask. The aorist indicative active, etesa, I asked, or I demanded. It's usually a strong asking, that's why. But without context, I don't know if it's simply ask or demand. But when I get to the participle, notice that this augment stops. I go back to the original verb, I, tes, as. The weak aorist participle demands this sigma added and these endings. Now the difference between this and luo is that the sigma has forced the contract verb, this vowel, to lengthen to a. So it's instead of just having as at the end, in which case the T and the S would actually combine. We have I, and epsilon lengthens to iteo, ites, a to eta. And then the endings, ites us, ites asa, ites an. Let's take another verb, agapao. Again, this lengthens this alpha to eta, agapesa, but notice the participle does not have the augment. Please notice the participle does not have the augment. It is not past time by itself. It might be in the context, but it is not by itself past time. The one loving, ha, agapes as, aorist participle. He, agapes asa, feminine. Again, the one loving, except we know it is feminine. And in the case of loving, it must be a woman or a girl loving, because if I had he, then I'm talking about a person. But if I have ta, agapes on, then I have an it loving, which may not make sense depending on what the it refers to. And we have a few more. Now, that's why I wanted to look at my textbook just a moment. Oh, here it is. Just a second. I want to make sure that we have completed section 20.1. Am I adding something from 20.2 here? I think maybe I've made a mistake, which wouldn't be the first time. Section 20.2 adds the present aorist participle of me verbs and the present, middle, and passive. No. In fact, let me see. Ah, yes, okay. This is the one aspect which I hadn't covered. That's why I put it in here. Now, I forget my own purpose in the class. forget everything. We complete, in this lesson, we complete section 20.1 by adding some verbs that we haven't had, contract verbs and also liquid verbs. We call them verbs that end in lambda or rho. We call liquid verbs because they tend to be very strange. The sigma, apostello, becomes, instead of something like luo, it becomes apestela. Notice that this became this. E became a in the aorist tense. Ape, stelas. Apo is a preposition. Notice the augment here. Apestela. I send, I sent. Okay, this is the aorist indicative active. But the participle then takes the stem stale, the aorist stem, but no augment. Don't put the augment on a participle. And the translation is sending, or ho apostelos, the one sending. Again, same thing. There's no difference in tense translation into English unless the context demands that I say the one who was sent, because by itself, it simply means the one who is sending, the one who sends, sorry, the one who sends. I will not translate with a present continuous because I have an aorist tense here. So I'll simply say the one who sends. If I have ha or he, apostelasa. But again, if you have learned your weak aorist forms, then these verbs that are here, for example, blepo, that adds the sigma, becomes bleps. We simply drop the augment to make the participle. Blepsas, blepsasa, blepson. If you've learned the endings of the aorist participle, then all you need to do is drop the augment in the participle. Remember, remember, remember that the participle is not necessarily past time. In fact, it is not past time at all, unless the context says it is, even though it's aorist, plepsas. So we are learning now the present tense participle, the strong aorist participle, and the forms of the weak aorist, or the first aorist, depending on the terms you use. All right, I'm going to stop here at this point because your minds are smoking. But in your homework, I'm going to begin using the participle. I'm expecting you to learn the forms from the book, section 20.1. I should be able now to ask you any form from the from section 20.1, including vocabulary 20.1, any form and any adjectival use. The man who is walking, or the man who walks, or the man who is walking, looking, describing walking. That's not good because that's an adverbial use. But I will give you examples of verses where a participle is used to describe a noun or substantival phrase. It's used as an adjective. So that is the second use of the participle that we are looking at this week. And next week, we will begin to look at the adverbial use. Then we have our midterm exam. We are not having major quizzes. There are too many of class. I have too many students to do major quizzes. We're having a midterm exam the last class of this before Christmas, which will be, let me see, now we are on the 7th, which will be next week, the 14th. Ah, yes, okay. So I can include the homework and the midterm exam, then this coming week homework, but I will mainly concentrate on the present and strong aorist participle forms because those are the ones which you should now be very familiar with, and a little bit familiar too with the weak aorist participle forms. We have gone over them now, I think, last week and this week again, but I am also too gracious, I think. We will not have class on the 21st because it is too close to Christmas. So next week will be our midterm exam, and it will be a long Moodle quiz, about 45 minutes to an hour, a little longer than a class quiz. And then we will meet together for a short time after that and just review a couple of things. And that will be our class next time. Any questions? Any questions? If someone has a question.
I think midterm exam made us so quiet.
I was also thinking about it. I was
Main
also
thing,
thinking.
main thing you need to know are the forms, and you need to be able to parse those
Isn't
verbs.
it very early, sir? Isn't it very early? Because next week is very early.
No, not if you study. It will not be not so hard. I am so gracious, man, so gracious. You know this by now.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
you are so kind.
Thank you. I hope that you are giving honest words. Yes.
We love.
So, but we will still meet after the midterm exam. Now, the midterm exam will be something like a major quiz. In fact, maybe even a little less. We are just limited, very limited by Zoom communication. Virtual was the word I wanted. But if we can get the main information across, maybe not as strong as we would, but still the main information, then you will be ready at the end for exegesis and MPhil if you want, if God is calling you this way. Besides, I didn't, it's not the first time I actually put this on Moodle. I'm pretty sure I did. Unless I'm thinking of Greek 1. With 2 sections, I have to make double announcements. And then I think I have also notified you as well. If I didn't, I am now. So midterm exam next week, but have no fear. You should be able to parse. You've had homework parsing, so it will be not unfamiliar to you. Parsing is not fun. I know parsing is not fun, but if we do parsing, then we are prepared for translation. And if we do translation, then we are ready for interpretation, because translation is interpretation. All right, I'm stopping the recording there.